You know what's brutal? Most people who lose their plants aren't doing anything dramatically wrong. No floods, no freezes, no infestations. They're making quiet, everyday mistakes that look completely harmless, right up until the plant is gone. I'm going to show you 7 of them today, and I promise you, at least 3 of these are happening in your garden right now. Stick around, because mistake number 4 is the one that shocks everyone. Most experienced gardeners have been doing it for years without realizing it's the reason their harvests keep underperforming. And that bonus tip at the end, it ties all 7 together in a way that changes how you see your whole garden. Game changer. Let's get into it. Hey there, garden friend. Welcome back. If you're new here, glad you found this channel. Now, because we don't do surface-level gardening advice. We dig into the actual science behind why plants thrive and why they die, so you stop guessing and start growing with confidence. Before we get into this list, do me a quick favor. If you've ever lost a plant you genuinely cared about and never figured out why, hit that subscribe button right now, because that exact situation is what this channel exists to fix. New video every week, free. Let's go. Mistake number 7. The kindness that kills. Overwatering. I know, you've heard it before, but here's what most people haven't heard. Overwatering isn't really about water. It's about oxygen. Plant roots don't just absorb moisture, they breathe. And when soil stays waterlogged for more than 24 to 48 hours, the oxygen pockets between soil particles collapse. Roots suffocate. Then they rot. And here's the brutal part. A rotting root system looks exactly like a thirsty plant. Wilting leaves, drooping stems. So what do most people do? They water more, and the plant dies faster. Here's how to know if this is you. Push your finger 2 inches into the soil. If it's still damp, put the watering can down. The plant is fine. It does not need water. What it needs is air. My favorite trick for this one, and it costs nothing. Take a wooden chopstick and push it 6 inches into the soil around your plant once a week. Pull it straight back out. Those small channels restore airflow to the root zone instantly. Takes 10 seconds. I've watched plants that were yellowing and stalling recover within a week from nothing but this one habit. One mature tomato plant lost to root rot represents roughly 15 to 25 pounds of fruit you'll never harvest. At store prices, that's $30 to $60 gone. From kindness. And if overwatering surprised you, wait until you hear mistake number 6, because this one is happening to gardeners who think they're doing everything right. In fact, the more carefully you follow the instructions on the bag, the worse this mistake gets. Mistake number 6, the bag that's lying to you. Synthetic fertilizer. Specifically, the habit of following the label instructions exactly as written and believing that more feeding equals more growth. Here is what the label does not tell you. Synthetic fertilizers do not feed your plant. They feed the symptom of a hungry plant. There is a difference, and that difference is costing you your soil. Here is the mechanism. Healthy soil is not dirt. It is a living ecosystem containing billions of bacteria, fungi, nematodes, and microorganisms per teaspoon. And their job, the job they have performed for millions of years without any human involvement, is to break down organic matter into the exact mineral forms plant roots can absorb. That biological process is what makes a plant genuinely strong. Strong cell walls, dense root systems, natural pest resistance. When you pour synthetic fertilizer into that system, 2 things happen. First, the plant gets a rapid hit of soluble nutrients, which looks great for about 2 weeks. Second, the high salt concentration in most synthetic formulas begins drawing moisture out of the soil microbiome, killing off the very organisms that were doing the long-term feeding work for free. The more consistently you apply synthetic fertilizer, the more dependent your plants become on it, because you are gradually dismantling the biological system that was making them self-sufficient. This is not a theory. A landmark study from the Rodale Institute tracked side-by-side organic and synthetic farming plots for 30 years. By year 10, the synthetically fertilized plots required increasingly higher inputs to maintain the same yields. The organically managed plots, fed only with compost and cover crops, produced equivalent or higher yields at a fraction of the ongoing cost, and their soil biology continued to improve every single season. Read that again. The plots that received no synthetic inputs kept getting better every year. The ones that did kept requiring more just to stay the same. Now here is what connects directly to your garden. If you have been using synthetic fertilizer for 2 or more seasons, your soil biology is likely compromised. And here's how you know. Your plants probably look fine in June and start struggling in August, just when they need the most support for fruiting. That mid-season crash is not a watering problem. It is not a pest problem. It is a soil biology problem. Here is the fix, and it costs almost nothing. Stop applying synthetic fertilizer entirely for one season. Instead, top dress every bed with 2 to 3 inches of well-aged compost in early spring and again in midsummer. If you want to accelerate the recovery, brew a simple compost tea. 1 handful of finished compost steeped overnight in a bucket of water, then strained and poured directly around the base of your plants once every 2 weeks. That liquid delivers billions of active soil microorganisms directly to the root zone. Most gardeners who make this switch report visibly thicker stems, darker foliage, and measurably better pest resistance within 4 to 6 weeks. The financial case is equally clear. The average gardener spends between $80 and $150 per season on synthetic fertilizer. A single bag of quality compost costs $12 to $18 and covers the same area for an entire season. A homemade compost system, which requires nothing but kitchen scraps, dry leaves, and patience, costs nothing after setup and produces an unlimited supply indefinitely. My single favorite trick for breaking the synthetic habit without losing confidence in the transition: plant a control row, 1 short row of any fast-growing crop. Radishes work perfectly, where you apply a half-strength synthetic feed as you normally would. Plant the identical variety beside it with compost only. Measure the harvest from both rows at the end of the season. In my own garden, the compost row outproduced the synthetic row by the 3rd planting cycle. Seeing that result in your own soil removes every remaining doubt. And now, mistake number 5 is the one that hit me hardest personally. This next mistake is not about what you are putting into your garden. It is about what you are looking at every single day without seeing it. The warning sign is right there in front of most gardeners every morning, and almost none of them know what it means. I did not know for 12 years, and it cost me more harvests than I want to count. Mistake number 5, the warning sign hiding in plain sight every single morning. Yellow leaves. Not the dramatic yellowing of a plant in full collapse. The quiet kind. 1 or 2 leaves near the base going pale, then yellow, then dropping off. Most gardeners see this and reach for a fertilizer. A few reach for a pesticide. And almost nobody does what actually fixes it, because almost nobody correctly identifies what that specific pattern of yellowing is actually telling them. Here's what I mean. Yellow leaves are not a single problem. They are a symptom library. And the location of the yellowing on the plant tells you exactly what the plant is deficient in, if you know how to read it. This is called mobile versus immobile nutrient deficiency. And once you understand it, you will never misdiagnose a struggling plant again. Here's the key. Some nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, magnesium, are mobile inside the plant. That means when the plant runs short of them, it pulls those nutrients from its oldest, lowest leaves and redirects them to the new growth at the top. Now, so yellowing that starts at the bottom of the plant and moves upward is almost always a mobile nutrient deficiency. The plant is not dying. It is making a rational decision to sacrifice old growth to protect new growth. Other nutrients, calcium, iron, sulfur, are immobile. The plant cannot move them once they are deposited in a cell. So when these are deficient, the yellowing appears in the newest growth at the top of the plant first. Young leaves going pale or yellow while the lower plant stays green is your signal for an immobile nutrient problem. Most gardeners do the opposite of what the plant is asking for in both cases. They apply a broad-spectrum liquid fertilizer that floods the system with nitrogen, which can actually make an immobile deficiency worse by accelerating growth faster than the plant can distribute the limited calcium or iron it has available. The new growth gets paler. The gardener adds more fertilizer. The cycle continues until the plant gives up. Bottom-up yellowing on older leaves, add compost, aged manure, or a diluted seaweed solution. A single application of liquid seaweed extract, roughly $12 for a concentrate that lasts an entire season, addresses nitrogen, phosphorus, and magnesium deficiency simultaneously without disrupting soil biology. Top-down yellowing on new growth. This is almost always calcium or iron. For calcium, dissolve 1 tablespoon of calcium chloride in 1 liter of water and spray directly onto the affected leaves. For iron deficiency, lower the soil pH with a light application of sulfur or diluted apple cider vinegar. Keep a simple phone note. 1 column for the plant name, 1 for where the yellowing appeared, 1 for what you applied, and 1 for the result 2 weeks later. After 1 season of tracking this, you will know your specific soil's patterns better than any generic gardening guide can tell you. You will stop reacting and start predicting. A misdiagnosed nutrient deficiency in a pepper plant costs you 4 to 8 weeks of productive fruiting time. In a courgette or cucumber, it can end the harvest entirely 6 weeks before the first frost. That is 6 weeks of daily picking gone. Not from disease, not from pests, but from misreading 2 yellow leaves on a Tuesday morning. Look at your plants tomorrow. Start at the bottom, then look at the top. The plant has already written you the diagnosis. You just needed to know the language. And if reading leaves surprised you, mistake number 4 is going to genuinely stop you in your tracks. Because this one is not about what is wrong with your plants. It is about what is wrong with where you put them. And once you see it, you will never look at your garden layout the same way again. Mistake number 4, the one I promised you at the start, and I need you to really hear this one. Planting in straight, single-crop rows. I know how that sounds. It sounds like preference, like aesthetics, like the kind of thing that could not possibly be the reason your harvests keep underperforming. But stay with me, because what is actually happening inside a monoculture row is one of the most well-documented and consistently ignored problems in home gardening. Here is the mechanism. When you plant a long row of the same crop, 12 tomatoes in a line, 20 cabbages side by side, a full bed of nothing but beans, you are not just planting vegetables. You are broadcasting a chemical signal. Every plant releases volatile organic compounds through its leaves and roots as part of its normal biological processes. These compounds are the plant's identity signal, its chemical fingerprint, its address in the ecosystem. And every major pest that attacks that plant has evolved over millions of years to follow exactly that signal directly to its food source. Aphids, cabbage moths, tomato hornworms, cucumber beetles. They do not wander randomly into your garden. They navigate. They lock onto the concentrated chemical signal of a monoculture row the way a heat-seeking missile locks onto an engine. A long row of one crop is not a garden bed. It is a landing strip with a neon welcome sign. The solution is not a spray. It is not a trap. It is not a barrier. It is simply other plants. Specifically, strongly aromatic companion plants placed strategically within and around your crop rows. And the reason this works is a phenomenon entomologists call olfactory confusion. When you interplant basil between your tomatoes, marigolds along your bed borders, and dill or cilantro between your brassicas, you are not adding decoration. You are drowning out your crop's chemical signal with a competing wall of aromatic noise. The pest arrives at the edge of your garden, attempts to navigate toward its target by smell, and finds nothing it can isolate and follow. It moves on, not because it was killed, not because it was trapped, because it literally could not find your vegetables. Research from multiple agricultural universities has confirmed that plots using structured companion planting experience between 40 and 60% less pest pressure than equivalent monoculture plots, without a single chemical input. The Amish have understood and applied this principle for over 300 years. Modern entomology has simply given us the language to explain why it works. Here is exactly how to restructure your beds starting this season. For every 3 to 4 tomato plants, place one basil plant 8 to 10 inches from the base. Between every row of cabbage, broccoli or kale, plant dill or cilantro every 12 to 14 inches. Along every bed border, plant French marigolds, not the large African pom-pom varieties, but the smaller French ones spaced 10 to 12 inches apart. Their roots release a compound called alpha-terthienol that suppresses root knot nematodes underground, while their scent deters whiteflies and squash bugs above ground. This is the restructure that made me feel genuinely foolish for not doing sooner. My pest pressure dropped so significantly in the first season of companion planting that I stopped buying any form of pest control product entirely. The saving was roughly $80 to $120 per season. The yield increase from plants that were no longer under constant pest stress. My tomato harvest in the first companion planted season was the largest I had recorded in 11 years of growing. One layout shift, no products, no sprays, no traps, just plants arranged in a pattern that uses biology instead of fighting it. And if rethinking your layout surprised you, mistake number 3 is going to hit even closer to home, because this one happens not in your garden beds, but in the one place every gardener goes before they even touch the soil. And the damage it causes arrives months before you ever see a single symptom. Hey, quick pause before we get into the top 3. Because these last 3 mistakes are where things get really serious. These are the ones that do not just slow your garden down. They systematically undermine everything you are trying to build season after season without ever announcing themselves. But first, if what you have heard so far has made you look at your garden differently, do me a favor right now and hit that like button. It takes 1 second and it tells YouTube to put this video in front of more gardeners who are losing plants they cannot explain. You might genuinely help someone save a harvest they were about to give up on. And I want to hear from you directly. Drop a comment below and tell me, which of these first 4 mistakes hit closest to home? Was it the overwatering, the synthetic fertilizer cycle, misreading those yellow leaves, or the monoculture row layout that was basically inviting every pest in your postcode to dinner? I read every single comment. And your answer is going to help me figure out which of these topics deserves its own dedicated deep dive video. All right, top 3. And I need you to stay focused for this next one, because mistake number 3 is not about technique, not about inputs, and not about layout. It is about timing. Specifically, the single most common timing mistake in home gardening that silently costs gardeners an average of 6 to 8 weeks of productive harvest every single season, without them ever realizing the season could have been longer. Mistake number 3. The 6 weeks you are leaving on the table every single season without knowing it, not hardening off your seedlings before transplanting them outdoors. I know some of you just nodded, and I know some of you just quietly thought, what does hardening off actually mean, and have I ever actually done it properly? Both reactions are valid, because this is the mistake that even experienced gardeners with years of growing behind them consistently underestimate. Not in theory, but in execution. They know the term. They do not know the mechanism. And that gap between knowing the word and understanding the biology is costing them more than they have ever calculated. Here is what is actually happening inside a seedling started indoors. Everything about the environment it grew in was soft. Stable temperature, no wind, diffused light through a window, or the gentle spectrum of a grow lamp. No UV exposure, no temperature fluctuation between day and night. And the seedling adapted perfectly to that environment, which means it built its cell structure, its leaf thickness, its root architecture, and its stomatal behavior entirely around conditions that do not exist outside. The moment you take that seedling and place it directly into outdoor conditions, full sun, wind, temperature swings, UV radiation, soil-borne microorganisms it has never encountered, you are not transplanting a plant. You are dropping an organism that has never left a controlled room into the equivalent of a wilderness expedition with no preparation. The plant does not die dramatically. It goes into a state of physiological shock that can last 2 to 3 weeks, and during those weeks it produces almost nothing. Multiply that 2 to 3 week shutdown across every transplant you put in the ground each season. Tomatoes, peppers, courgettes, aubergines, brassica starts. If you are transplanting 8 to 12 varieties directly from indoor starts to outdoor beds without a hardening off period, you are losing the equivalent of 2 to 3 weeks of productive growth from every single one of them simultaneously. That is 6 to 8 weeks of collective harvest time evaporating from your season before it even properly begins. Here's the fix. Beginning 10 to 14 days before your planned transplant date, bring your seedlings outside for progressively longer periods each day. Day 1, 2 hours in a shaded, sheltered spot. Day 3, 4 hours introducing gentle morning sun. Day 5, 6 hours moving into partial afternoon sun. Day 7, full day outside in their intended growing position, but bring them in overnight if temperatures drop below 10 degrees Celsius. By day 10 to 14, the plant has rebuilt its leaf surface wax layer, restructured its stomatal response, developed thicker cell walls from wind stress, and established UV protective pigmentation. That plant goes into the ground ready to grow from day 1, not day 21. Here's my favorite detail about this process that most gardening guides leave out entirely. The wind exposure during hardening off is not incidental. It is the single most important stressor you are introducing. Wind causes the seedling stem to flex repeatedly throughout the day. That mechanical stress triggers a hormonal response that thickens the stem, shortens the inner nodes, and strengthens the root anchor. A wind-hardened transplant establishes its root system in outdoor soil in roughly half the time of an unhardened one. A single pepper plant, fully hardened before transplanting, will typically begin flowering 2 to 3 weeks earlier than an equivalent unhardened plant placed in the same bed on the same date. At an average of 6 to 8 fruits per plant, that timing difference represents a measurable portion of your entire pepper harvest, gained entirely from 2 weeks of moving a tray in and out of your back door. Free. Zero cost. 6 weeks of collective harvest time recovered across your whole garden in a single season. And if the biology of transplant shock surprised you, mistake number 2 is going to reframe something you do every single time you water, every time you feed, and every time you walk past your beds without stopping. It is the most invisible mistake on this entire list, and statistically, it is the one most likely to be happening in your garden right now at this exact moment. Mistake number 2, the one happening in your garden right now, at this exact moment, and you almost certainly cannot see it. Compacted soil. Not dramatically compacted, not the kind of compaction you would notice by looking at your beds, the quiet, incremental, invisible kind that builds up over 2 or 3 seasons of normal gardening activity. Walking between rows, pressing transplants into beds, heavy rainfall landing on bare soil surfaces, the simple weight of watering cans set down in the same spot repeatedly, until the soil that was once loose and alive has been compressed into a dense, layered structure that is slowly suffocating everything growing in it. Here's the mechanism. Healthy soil is approximately 50% solid material and 50% pore space, the network of air and water channels between soil particles that roots navigate through, that oxygen travels along, that beneficial organisms colonize and move through. That pore space is the infrastructure of your entire growing system. It is where water drains instead of pooling. It is where roots extend rather than circling. It is where the billions of soil organisms that constitute your garden's immune system live, breed, and do their work. When that pore space collapses, even partially, when even in just the top 4 to 6 inches of your bed, roots cannot penetrate deeply enough to access the moisture and mineral reserves stored in the lower soil profile. They stay shallow. Shallow roots cannot anchor the plant against wind stress. They cannot reach water during dry spells. They cannot access the full spectrum of minerals distributed at different soil depths. The plant above ground looks fine in spring when surface moisture is abundant. It begins struggling in July and August, precisely when it needs deep root access most. During fruiting, during the hottest and driest weeks of the season. And here's what makes compaction particularly insidious. It does not announce itself with symptoms you can easily attribute to it. The plant displays what looks like drought stress, or nutrient deficiency, or heat stress, because those are the downstream consequences of a root system that cannot access what it needs. Gardeners treat the symptom. They water more frequently, they add more fertilizer, they provide shade. And the compaction underneath continues quietly doing its damage because nobody identified it as the source. Here's how to diagnose it right now in under 2 minutes. Take a standard pencil and push it straight down into your garden bed using only the pressure of your index finger. If the pencil sinks easily to its full length, your soil structure is healthy. If it meets resistance and stops before reaching the eraser, you have compaction at that depth. Test 3 to 4 spots across each bed. The results will tell you exactly where the problem is concentrated and how deep it runs. Here's the fix. And it works in a single season. Do not rotivate. Do not double dig. Both approaches destroy soil structure and fungal networks that took years to establish. Instead, use a broad fork, a long-handled tool with 2 to 4 tines that you drive into the soil and lever back and forth without turning it over. This fractures compaction and reopens pore channels while leaving the existing soil layers, fungal networks, and organism communities completely intact. One pass across a 4 by 8 foot bed takes roughly 10 minutes. If you do not own a broad fork, which costs between $40 and $80 and lasts a lifetime, you can achieve a meaningful partial result by pushing a garden fork 12 inches into the bed every 8 to 10 inches across the entire surface and wiggling it gently back and forth before pulling it straight out. Not as effective as a broad fork, significantly better than nothing. And you can start this afternoon. The long-term prevention is simpler than the cure. Never step into a garden bed, ever. Design every bed to a maximum width of 4 feet so every inch of soil is reachable from the path without requiring you to place your weight on the growing area. One structural decision made once eliminates compaction as an ongoing problem permanently. A study tracking root depth in compacted versus decompacted garden beds found that plants in decompacted soil developed root systems averaging 40% deeper by midsummer, accessing moisture and mineral reserves completely unavailable to their shallow-rooted counterparts. Those deeper-rooted plants produced measurably higher yields through the hottest and driest weeks of the season. They did not need more water. They did not need more fertilizer. They needed their roots to be able to go where the water and fertilizer already were. Your soil has resources in it right now that your plants cannot access. Not because those resources are missing, because the path to them is blocked. And now, mistake number 1, I told you at the beginning this would surprise you. I told you most experienced gardeners have been doing it for years. I meant both of those things. And I want you to pay close attention, because this final mistake is not something you do once and move on from. It is something you are either doing every single day or not doing every single day. And the compounding difference between those two paths, measured across a full growing season, is the largest single performance gap on this entire list. Mistake number one, and I need you to hear me on this, because this one is going to feel wrong before it feels right. Not doing nothing, not neglecting your garden, not being lazy or inattentive or careless. The number one mistake silently killing plants in home gardens across the world is intervening too much, too fast, too often. I told you this would surprise you. Here's what I mean. Every gardener has a version of the same instinct. You walk your garden in the morning, you see something that looks slightly off. A curled leaf, a pale stem, 2 aphids on a tomato, a small patch of discoloration on a squash. And every instinct you have says, do something. Spray something, add something, remove something, adjust something. The gardening industry has spent decades reinforcing that instinct because every product on every shelf exists to monetize it. See a problem, buy a solution, apply it immediately. And that instinct, that deeply human, deeply well-intentioned impulse to help, is the single most consistent cause of plant death in home gardens. Not pests, not disease, not weather. The gardener. Here is the biology behind why. Plants are not passive. They are active, responsive, immunologically sophisticated organisms that have been solving the exact problems you are panicking about for 400 million years. When a plant detects early pest pressure, 2 aphids, a handful of caterpillar eggs, the first signs of fungal spore landing on a leaf, it initiates a cascade of internal defense responses. It produces volatile compounds that signal to beneficial predatory insects in the surrounding area. It thickens the cell walls of adjacent leaves. It increases the concentration of defensive secondary metabolites in its tissues that make it less palatable to the pest attempting to feed. That process takes between 48 and 72 hours to deploy fully, and it works repeatedly, reliably, across millions of plant species under millions of different pest pressures. When you spray at the first sign of pest activity, even with an organic spray, even with neem oil, even with the gentlest possible intervention, you do 2 things simultaneously. You disrupt the plant's own defense signaling by altering the chemical environment of its leaf surface, and you kill the early arriving beneficial predators, the first ladybugs, the first parasitic wasps, the first lacewing larvae that were navigating toward your garden precisely because the plant had already called for them. You eliminate both the plant's internal defense and its incoming reinforcements in a single application. The Amish principle of Gelassenheit, yielding to the natural order rather than overriding it, is not theology in the garden. It is the most evidence-backed pest management philosophy available. Modern entomology has spent 40 years confirming through peer-reviewed research what 3 centuries of Amish observation already established. A garden built to support its own biological balance manages most pest pressure without human intervention. The gardener's job is to build that system. Healthy soil, companion planting, insectary strips, diverse habitat, and then trust it to operate. Here's the practical rule I now apply without exception. When I see pest activity in my garden, I do nothing for 72 hours. I observe. I note the species, the scale, the location. I check whether beneficial predators are already present or arriving. In the overwhelming majority of cases, I would estimate 80% or more, the situation has either stabilized or begun resolving by hour 72 through the garden's own biological response. I intervene only when the pressure is genuinely escalating after that observation window. And when I do intervene, I use the most targeted, most localized method available: hand removal, trap cropping, a direct application to the affected plant only. Never a broadcast spray across the whole garden that disrupts the beneficial populations doing free work everywhere else. The compounding return on this single habit change is almost impossible to overstate. Every season you resist the impulse to intervene immediately, your garden's biological infrastructure grows stronger, more diverse, and more self-sufficient. The beneficial insect populations increase. The soil organism communities expand. The plants develop stronger immune responses through repeated low-level challenge. By season 3 of this approach, your garden does not just have fewer pest problems. It has a fundamentally different relationship with its ecosystem, one where balance is the default state rather than the ideal you are constantly spending money trying to achieve. Do less. Observe more. Trust the biology. That is the single highest return change available to any gardener at any level. And it costs nothing. Now, I promised you a bonus at the start of this video, something that ties all 7 of these mistakes together. Stay with me, because this is the part that changes how you see everything we have covered today. All right, I promised you this at the very beginning, and I do not take that lightly. Here it is. Every single mistake on this list: the overwatering, the synthetic fertilizer dependency, the misread yellow leaves, the monoculture rows, the skipped hardening off, the compacted soil, the over-intervention. Every one of them shares a single common root cause. And when you fix the root cause, you do not fix one mistake. You fix all 7 simultaneously. The root cause is this: most gardeners manage what they can see. Almost no gardener manages what they cannot. Everything above the soil line is visible: the leaves, the stems, the fruits, the pests, the discoloration. So that is where attention goes. That is where products are aimed. That is where interventions land. And meanwhile, every system that actually determines whether a plant thrives or fails, the soil biology, the root architecture, the mycorrhizal networks, the pore space infrastructure, the microbial immune system, operates completely underground, completely invisible, completely unmanaged by the vast majority of people growing food. Here's the bonus: the one habit that forces you to manage the invisible system rather than just react to the visible symptoms. Once per season, once in spring before planting, and once in midsummer at peak production, dig a single soil pit. Choose a spot near your most important bed. Dig a hole 1 foot wide and 1 foot deep. Then stop and look at what you have exposed. You are looking for 4 things. First, color. Dark, almost black soil throughout the profile means active organic matter decomposition and healthy biology. Pale, gray, or reddish soil means depleted biology. Second, structure. Healthy soil breaks into irregular crumbling aggregates when you squeeze a handful. Compacted soil comes out in dense slabs. Third, smell. Healthy soil smells rich, earthy, and faintly sweet. That smell is produced by actinomycetes bacteria and is the single most reliable indicator of a thriving soil microbiome you can assess without any equipment. Fourth, life. Count the earthworms visible in that 1 cubic foot. Fewer than 5 means your biology needs significant rebuilding. 10 or more means your soil ecosystem is functioning. 20 or more means you have built something exceptional. That single pit, dug twice a season, tells you more about the true health of your garden than any symptom visible above ground ever could. It tells you whether this season's interventions are working before the plants show you the results. It catches problems 6 to 8 weeks before they surface as yellowing leaves or stunted growth or collapsing harvests. Manage the invisible. Everything visible takes care of itself. So there you have it. 7 mistakes that are not dramatic, not obvious, and not the things most gardening content will ever tell you about. Because fixing them does not require buying anything. It requires understanding the biology underneath everything you can see. Fix the invisible system, and the visible results follow. Every single time. If this video changed how you see your garden, even one section, even one idea, hit that subscribe button right now. Every week on this channel, we go this deep into the science behind why plants thrive and why they fail. So you stop guessing and start growing with genuine confidence. It is completely free, and it is the fastest way to make sure you never miss what is coming next. And I genuinely want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me, Which of these 7 mistakes are you going to fix first? Are you reaching for the broad fork to tackle compaction? Redesigning your rows with companion planting? Or are you committing to that 72-hour observation rule before you ever reach for a spray again? Drop it below. I read every single comment, and your answer shapes what I cover next. And speaking of what is coming next, if this video resonated with you, the next one is going to hit even harder. We are going deep into the 7 things Amish gardeners do in the first 2 weeks of spring that determine the entire productivity of their season before a single seed goes in the ground. Most conventional gardeners skip every one of them. The difference in harvest by August is not subtle. That video drops next week. Make sure you are subscribed and the bell is on so you do not miss it. Now get out there, dig that soil pit, and go build something that takes care of itself. I will see you in the next one. Garden friend.